Hello, welcome to my social media Lent devotional series, where together we're going to be following Christ's journey to the crucifixion and then continuing on to the resurrection. I'm Jennifer Slattery from the Faith Over Fear podcast and also from the Your Daily Bible Verse podcast. And my desire for each of us is that through this series, we would experience God's love on a deeper level and that we would come to anchor ourselves more securely in His grace. And I want to start from a place acknowledging that many of us are in a place of waiting. Many of us have numerous unmet longings that we are asking Jesus continually to fill. And many of us have loved ones who are struggling and maybe who are self-destructing. And we have longing for them as well, to see them walk in the thriving life of Jesus Christ. And I want to acknowledge both of those places. I have had people that I have prayed for decades, and it not only seems like they're not moving closer to Jesus, but in many ways it seems like they're slipping further and further away from Him, and that hurts. And I also have areas in my life where I still want God to save me from something, right? To reach down into my mess and pull me out, to do something miraculous and to rectify some problem or to help me to avoid it. And so as we approach Lent, we acknowledge those longings. We acknowledge those hurts. We acknowledge the pain of feeling like we are crying out to God constantly and wondering if He hears us. And I was thinking about all of that as I was prayerfully contemplating the passage we're starting with. And so it comes from John chapter 12. And beginning in verse 20, we read, "Now there were some Greeks among those who were going up to worship at the feast." And so this is the feast of Passover. And Passover was the one celebration during which Jews everywhere were required to travel to Jerusalem to worship. And as you see here, there were some non-Jews who would go as well. Those who had come to believe that Creator God was truly the one true God and wanted to worship Him. And so here these Greeks were coming, wanting to encounter God. And they said to Philip, one of Jesus's disciples, they said, "Hey, we want to see Jesus." And so Philip told his brother Andrew, and then Andrew and Philip, they went and they told Jesus, "Hey, there's some Greeks here who want to see you." And from my perspective, Jesus responded in an unexpected way. Like, if I had been Philip or Andrew, I would have expected Jesus to stop what He was doing and be like, "Yeah, hey, they want to meet me. They want to kind of encounter me. Sure, take me to them or bring them to me." But that's not what Jesus did. In fact, so we read in verse 23, "And Jesus answered them saying, 'The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified.'" And then He gives this agricultural analogy to speak about His death. And He says, "Truly, truly, I say to you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit." And now I have to wonder, like, let's just imagine that those Greeks were maybe Philip's friends or family members, and how that would feel to hear that. Like, "Hey, my family wants to encounter you, Jesus." And He's like, "Hey, I'm going to die. A kernel of wheat's going to fall to the ground, and it's going to bear much fruit." And I think I would have felt maybe rebuffed and confused. Or imagine if those Greeks were your family members, or even if they were you, how you would feel. It would seem like God was ignoring your pain, ignoring your request, your unmet longing. But when we have in Scripture, we know how the Scripture tells us how the story ends. And we know what Jesus meant when He was talking about the kernel of wheat that fell to the ground and that died and that resulted in much fruit. And if you listen to today's Your Daily Bible Verse episode, Carol McCracken talks about this and Christ's invitation to bring life to all. So basically, He wasn't saying no to them. He was about to do something greater, something more life-giving. He wasn't just going to fix their temporary problems. He didn't come to change a political system. He came to bring thriving life in every circumstance. And so they were, in many ways, in a place of waiting, like many of you, like at times I am as well. And when we are in that place of waiting, it's easy to grow discouraged. And that's why it can be helpful to reflect on passages like this, where Jesus, although his response probably felt very confusing to the disciples in that moment because they didn't have the full story, those of you who've read the story know that thriving life was coming. And so that is the hope that we hold on to when we are praying and it seems like God isn't answering. We know that, in fact, he is always at every moment pushing back our world's darkness and the darkness within our own lives with his life-giving light.